From Boston, Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett. Of course, you can see right away I'm not at my Victory Garden in Boston. I'm again at a suburban location. First of all, I want to talk to you about this little dwarf peach tree. Now, this tree was actually planted in our garden in Boston for demonstration purposes last year. It looked as though it was dead when we planted it. We moved it again out here to the country where it'd have a little more room to grow. This tree was about this height when we bought it. But we cut it way back to here, and so we had just one single stub. And I want to remind you that if you're planting what we call stone fruit, that is peaches or nectarines or cherries or plums, you've simply got to cut them back so severely that you wouldn't think the plant will live, but it is its chance of survival. Now, from it we have gotten this new growth, and on this dwarf tree, let's just talk about what it's going to do this year. It hasn't been in the ground but 12 months so far. It is loaded with flower buds all the way on every one of these stems. Now, the way you tell what a flower bud looks like is it is the round one, and they usually come in pairs, and the one right in between is going to be a leaf bud, which will make a new branch. Well, today I'm going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know about how to grow herbs and roses, and I'm going to tell you and show you how to keep varmints out of your garden. But first of all, let me show you an herb garden that I laid out earlier today. One of the happy instances in gardening is to discover a spot which just seems to be made for a particular situation. And I have in here a spot about 10 feet square, facing due south, beneath the kitchen window, and such a spot for an herb garden. Now, herbs have become exceedingly popular, and I'm going to show you how to put in an herb garden right here in a small piece of ground, something which will last for many, many years. And I must begin by telling you that this soil was a typical contractor's soil. All sorts of rocks and rubble and such in it. And when people tell you that herbs just don't need good soil, that they will grow in poor soil, it's only an indication of how darn tough they are. They will grow in poor soil, but they'll grow much better if you do something to enrich the soil. So we have put in here a good lot of peat moss and some good loam right out of the garden, and so we know that these plants are going to not only grow, they will thrive. And any time of the day, it's practically 3 steps from the kitchen door to pick, for example, some chives, something like this. Now, I brought along a chive from the greenhouse just to show you what the chive blossom looks like. Now, this clump will get up about 18 inches tall. You can pick the chives all summer long, and this is balanced on this side of the path, just for the fun of it. We have another chive balanced over here. Now, speaking of balance, we are going to try to set out this garden in a rather formal manner. For example, the boxwood hedge. This is the true English boxwood. Slow growing, will last forever, will never overpower the garden itself, and can be sheared to be kept as small as it is right now if we want to. Well, if you look down at the garden, you can see that I have made what looks like a lot of white lines simply by using some lime, just ordinary ground limestone, so that I could delineate where I want these particular plants to go. And if I had made a mistake, let's say I had a line out through there, well, I want to erase it, I can do so, because the lime is going to help those plants grow anyway. I should tell you that this little plant right down here, for example, is chamomile. Now, you perhaps have heard of chamomile tea made from the foliage of this particular plant. Chives, of course, for cooking. Now, coming up the central path, which, by the way, I want to talk about the path and why we have it, just so that you won't keep trampling the ground. Behind it, this cross path of gravel is because it's directly underneath the drip line of the roof. And so if we planted in here, the plants would be battered by the water coming off the roof. Let's talk about the central path just for a minute. The plants here are thyme, the true mother of thyme, it's called. Very, very fragrant for cooking, for sachets, whatever you want to make from them. This is the thyme which will overspread the path and make a very graceful sort of encroachment over the path. Next to it, another fragrant flower on either side. This is true lavender. Again, something for perfume. It will grow about so tall, have lavender flowers on it, or purple flowers. Lavender and the lavender color come from, of course, the same root. The plant itself has these lavender flowers on it. Now over in this corner, we have rosemary, a nice clump of rosemary, balanced by the gray over here of sage. In the far corner, I'm going to just plant a couple of things for you. In this most secluded corner, I'm putting in some tarragon, because tarragon is not terribly hardy in this part of the world. Down along the fence, along this wall, I'm putting in dill, and I want you to see what dill looks like. This came out of our greenhouse. You grow in the greenhouse or on a windowsill. This will have to be planted from seed, and I will plant dill seed all the way down here, and it'll get up and cover the foundation during the summer. I want to get to this little plant on the corner because people say, you know, I've heard of a marigold and a pot marigold. Well, a pot marigold is what we call a calendula, but it's called a pot marigold because it's good for cooking. This is an excellent herb to grow in your garden. Next to it in here, we have some Italian parsley, the plain leaf parsley. You've all so far I've talked mostly about plants that are going in, things that are going in as plants, but now some are going in as seeds. For example, in this little area will be sweet marjoram. A lovely little flower, will grow up so tall, can be harvested any time. Behind it, borage. Now, borage is one of those plants that's truly loved by the bees, and it has a star-shaped blue flower, grows about 1.5 feet tall, and is another one of those plants whose flowers can be dipped in sugar and candied, you might say. I guess that is the term for it, candied. Now, I had a request when I said I was going to put in an herb garden. I said, would you please put in some large-leafed French sorrel? So right in here will go a clump of sorrel. Well, let's move across this other side. Another one which you must have in cooking is basil. This will also go in from seed, but this is just a very small basil plant that's been going along in the greenhouse for a while. I see it's been picked and used and used and used. This will be basil from seed. Next to it will be chervil, which we'll grow. This will again be a clump that we will grow from seed. In this little corner will be summer savory. Summer savory in here, backed up by another lavender plant. And down in the front, I have the lemon balm. This nice clump of lemon balm. This is called Melissa officinalis. This, if you want a cool drink in the summertime, try putting in a sprig or two of lemon balm in, let's say, in place of mint, just as something special in this, as a little change. Along in here is Santolina, or lavender cotton. Lovely gray-green foliage. Perhaps one of the things that you should know about an herb garden is it is not usually spectacularly colorful, but it is full of fragrances, both to enjoy through the nostrils and through the palate. A marvelous thing to do is to have an herb garden, and if you can find one with a sunny exposure, It can be very, very small. You can even grow them in pots if you need to, but I hope that you will grow an herb garden. It'll be a great thrill to you. It'll last for years, and you'll really learn the thrills of cooking when you use some of these herbs fresh, right out of your own herb garden. Well, I promised you a rose garden, and here it is. I chose this particular site for a rose garden because it's right out in the open where there's a great deal of sunshine. Now, roses need sunshine if they are to do their best. Also, because it's in the open, there's all sorts of good air circulation. That will cut down on the incidence of disease, one of those problems to which some roses are prone. In designing this particular garden, we chose a section at the end of a long lawn where this will be the focal point, beyond which is the vegetable garden. Now, the vegetable garden will be somewhat hidden by the fact that we have the rose garden here with climbing roses on the fence. But let me talk to you now about what the real secret is in growing roses. And the real secret is that initial soil preparation, because the roses themselves could very well be in here for 20 years or longer. You will never get a second chance to prepare the soil. Now, this was an old perennial garden. There was all sorts of stuff in here which had to be dug out. And then we came out onto the lawn. And you can see the curve here of the lawn, so that in the summertime it'll be easy enough to run a lawnmower right along the edge and not have an edging problem. We won't have the encroachment of the grass on it. But I want to show you where we started, right here with sod. Now, if I want to get this rose garden in the best possible condition, the first thing I want to do is to get out all of the grass roots and all of the weeds, which could be perennial weeds. So I'm taking out, as you see, a whole spit, so-called, a spade's depth. And all of that will go onto my compost pile. And that's where all of the rest of this is done. But we actually cut this stuff right out of here and get rid of it once and for all. Now, you could very well say, well, now what do you do? Because your garden is going to be lower than the surrounding area. What we did was to put in six cubic foot bales of sphagnum peat moss in a bed which is 40 feet long and roughly 10 feet wide. Then we got a big load of leaf mold, and we rototilled that whole stuff together. So these roses are going to be off to a flying start. As I say, you'll never have another chance. We can apply surface fertilizers to them, but we can never get down to the root system below if we don't do it now. So that we left this one to show what we did in the rest of the garden. But let's come over here and I'll show you, well, first of all, maybe a little design, and then we'll plant a rose or two. Along here on the very back, against the fence, we've started some climbing roses. Now, at the first year that when you plant a climbing rose, you can't expect blossoms. You might get 1 or 2 blossoms down here, but it won't look like a climber. During this year, the climber will make canes which may be 8 or 10 feet long, which we will come up and tie along on these various rails of the fence. Let me let you in on a little secret of how to make climbing roses blossom. Train the canes horizontally. If they go vertically, you'll get some flowers. If they are trained horizontally, you'll get many, many flowers. Usually, climbing roses blossom only on what is called mature wood more than 1 year old. Occasionally, we get a few flowers on the first year's wood, but don't bet on it. The next year is when we'll get a lot of flowers on them. However, In this garden we have a number of other kinds of roses besides climbers. For example, in the back, in this particular area, we're growing some roses called grandifloras. Now, grandiflora, I think, is a pretty good name. Enormous flowers which look like tea roses. They come in clusters, and there are many, many of them. Rather a tall growing type of rose. Now, I'm not going into all of the varieties that I have here because there are literally hundreds and hundreds from which to choose. Nevertheless, we have some grandifloras there. Down in the front, we're having some, or in the middle distance, I should say, some tea roses. Now, the tea roses in New England will grow to be roughly 2.5 to 3.5 feet tall in a season, but I know that right at this very moment in Texas, in the South, in California, your roses are in full bloom, but it's still pretty early around in this part of the country. So we have taller grandifloras, then we'll have the tea roses, and then following along here by the border is this wonderful type of rose which is called the floribunda. And if ever there was a well-named plant, this is it. It has an abundance of flowers. They come in clusters. They grow all season long. And they, in this part of the world, they'll probably grow 2 feet tall and form a continuous band of color all summer long in front of them. Now, I want to plant a few because we just don't have all that much time. Let me say, before we actually plant this particular plant, let me talk about it for a minute of what the nurseryman, the garden center man, is going to sell you a rose in a container, because this plant can be moved well, at any time of the year, right? So long as it's still growing in the container and you can dig in the ground, you can plant it. It used to be that roses came to you only bare root, and they had to be planted immediately. The nurseryman now offers you these all summer long. These plants are practically dormant. They have just been put into the containers, and they do not have a strong root system. So therefore, when I go to tip this out, there's no sense in my trying to hold the soil on, because I know from this experience of these other plants that I'm going to end up with a bare root plant in my hand, and I'll show you how to plant it. Ordinarily, when the plants are growing and you have a nice ball of soil on there, then you can preserve that without any trouble. Preserve that ball of soil. Of course, the plant never even knows it's been moved. Now, I'm going to make a big hole for even the smallest type of a plant, because I do not want to cramp those roots. Sometimes this is a little bit discouraging to a person if he thinks he's going to plant 100 rose bushes, because he's talking about a lot of good effort. Now, let's knock this out, because I promise you what's inside here. You see, these roots have not begun to grow. Nevertheless, this is a fabulous plant. I want you to look at this nice root system coming in here. Right up at this joint is where the variety, which happens to be Saratoga, a white one, is going to go. Soil has all been enriched. Now, you watch how I plant this particular rose. We talk about how we do it in other parts of the country. I want to make sure that I get soil all the way underneath here, sort of a crown. Now, this is the critical point. If you live in the warm part of the country, this should be about 2 inches above the soil. But where we live in the north, that has to be down about 1 inch or 2 under the soil, because this is going to be its protection against winter cold. That's called the bud union. That's where this beautiful white Saratoga rose was budded onto the root of a very vigorous wild rose. If I don't protect that bud union, when the cold weather comes, only the wild rose will grow. Then, get right in it beside a rose like this that's going in bare root. Stamp it right down very solidly. Build up then a saucer-like depression. We'll just fill that up with water, and that plant will be in pretty good shape. Now, what you might do if you're first putting your roses in the spring is take some extra soil, cover up around them like this for about a week or so. And that will, until the buds begin to swell, and you can sort of peek at them a little bit and see how they're coming. Then uncover it and let them grow from there. Now I want to talk to you about right in the center of this garden, we have 3 standard roses. They're called tree roses. This stalk growing up from the ground is a wild rose. A bud of this lovely white rose called Pascali was inserted on the stem right there, and now we have this great growth. This plant, this and 3 others will go in the center here. Then underneath this will be later on a cluster of miniature roses. We have a great design coming back to this garden again and again. When you buy these at a nursery, you ask the nurseryman to cut the can open for you, and he has a special tool. These tin snips will do it, but he will have a special tool that will cut this right on down, tie a string around it so you can put it in your car and take it home with you. Very simple thing to do, and these, so long as they're in containers, can be planted on and on and on throughout the summer. Well, I can talk to you about one last thing. To make it easy to take care of these plants, we mulch them with bark mulch, so this will settle as it goes, but this will keep the weeds down. Well, you know, I could talk to you about roses all day long, but I better go right now and show you how to keep those varmints out of your vegetable garden. Now, my friend has some of the best garden soil that I know of. He has plenty of sunshine for these vegetables to grow, but let me tell you, he still has some problems. He has, first of all, the raccoon, and they can never make a fence tall enough that a raccoon can't climb over. And he has the rabbits. Well, they're stupid. They'll walk around the outside, and so long as there's any kind of a fence, a foot tall, the rabbit is apt to stay on the outside. But he has woodchucks, and they are burrowers, and they'll go underneath almost anything. So you have to put a barrier beneath the ground for them. And then, of course, there's the neighborhood dogs, and every one of these creatures would like to spend their time inside the garden where that soil is nice and soft. But we're putting up here what's called an electric fence. Now, we won't even energize this fence until about the day before the corn gets ripe, because that's when the raccoons will become interested, and that's what this fence is for. Now, the raccoon is a climber, and he'll come up here and he'll touch a paw or his nose on this wire. It won't hurt him, but every hair on his head will stand right up straight. I'll tell you, he'll get such a shock, and he will never come close to this garden again. And that's your true way of keeping the raccoons out. But let's talk about those woodchucks. Now, we went around, you can see on the other side of this fence, where the fence itself is buried roughly 8 inches or so in the ground. And all we're going to do now is just fill in right up around there. Matter of fact, you could grow some crops up against it, but that is now a woodchuck barrier. Just fill right in here. You can see this is tough. This, by the way, is a wire which is a welded, about 1.5 inches by 2 inch welded, welded wire, which is sometimes called dog wire. Very, very satisfactory. Now, that will take care of all of these creatures. We will have the dogs and the raccoons and the woodchucks and the rabbits out of the garden. But let me see if we have a minute or two, because I'd like to answer a few more questions. And we certainly do get them. Now, this first one comes from Florida, Stark, Florida. How effective is a garlic solution to repel cabbage worm caterpillars? Well, I know that garlic is strong enough to repel almost anything. But when I take care of my cabbage worm caterpillars, I use a non-chemical insecticide called Bacillus thuringiensis. Now, I know it's sold under trade names of Dipel, Biotrol, and Thuricide. You could drink it. It wouldn't hurt you. There's no chemicals involved, but it certainly raises havoc with any kind of a caterpillar. Save the garlic for the salad. From New Jersey, I have a large 15-year-old magnolia tree on my front garden, and I'd love to grow grass under it. So far, I have had no success. What can I do? Well, I can almost guarantee that you won't have success growing it under a tree with such dense shade. Why don't you instead get some bark mulch and put about a 2-inch layer of bark mulch underneath wherever you know that the grass won't grow. It's attractive looking, there'll be no grass, no weeds, and it'll be very nice looking throughout the entire year. What's more, it will conserve moisture for the tree. From Chassell, Michigan, can a cyclamen plant from my florist be divided, and how? No, it should not be divided. It has a beet-like corm, so-called, a type of a bulb from which it grows, and the only way it can be propagated, to be sure of satisfaction, is from seed. It takes roughly 12 to 15 months, sometimes longer, to get a plant into blossom, but you grow them from seeds and not division of that original tuber or corm. From Tulsa, Oklahoma, I have a Christmas cactus that will not bloom, although it gets the very best of care. Why won't it blossom? Well, let me tell you what a Christmas cactus needs. It needs some partial shade. It is not a desert cactus. The soil should always be moist. Once every couple of months, give it a little houseplant fertilizer. But the key to blossoms is cool temperatures. About 6 weeks in the fall, it must have temperatures down to 45 degrees or 50 degrees. Then you will get flower buds. Well, next week, we hope to show you a very special feature from some gardens in Great Britain that we visited this spring. You're going to meet my friend Peter Seabrook, who's an eminent horticulturist and a TV gardener there, and you may see some things that you've never seen before. I'm Jim Crockett in Crockett's Victory Garden, and I hope you enjoy the program every week.